Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
Pint Glass Football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler. What's up, PGF Nation? ESPN recently put out an article titled 2024 NFL Future Power Rankings. We're going to give you our thoughts on this list. We're going to tell you where they got it right, where they got it wrong. But joining me to do so, like always, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what is going on?
Hey, Brad. Finally, training camp is open. But by the time you listen to this, every training camp should be open. It's almost over, guys. It's almost over.
Yeah, it's really exciting, man. We're finally getting down the home stretch here. The summer is slowly winding down here. We're getting closer to some real football. Like you said, training camp is underway. That's always exciting. When training camp starts, you know that you're getting close here. We're only a few weeks away from preseason. In August 24th, I believe, is the first college football games. That's right around the corner, a couple weeks away from that. And it's go time, Alex. It is go time. We're going to be talking about games and breaking down games here soon, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But this article was intriguing, Alex, and you brought this to my attention, the future power rankings that ESPN put out. And the way they did this, if you guys didn't see the article, they're basically looking at these teams. They're breaking it down kind of into tiers with the quarterback, the coaching, the front office, and then the overall roster. And they kind of came up with rankings. Some of ESPN's top guys were involved in this. And they're projecting out basically the next 3 seasons. So they're looking at the future, but not so far out, just kind of these next 3 years. Who are the best teams that are positioned to have the most success? Some of these teams we agree with. We're not going to go through them all, but some of these teams we think they really missed the mark on. Alex, where do you want to start here on these rankings?
I think we should start right at the top. We should start with number one with the bullet. We should start with the Chiefs, based upon the fact that this is a 3-year outlook on a team. I think we can both agree, we don't like their wide receiver room. I don't like their running back room. Now, their offensive line, very good. Joe Tooney being the only one that may perhaps be gone in the next 3 years. If they were to keep everybody as is, and obviously based upon the quarterback position, this is weighted heavily on the quarterback position. And this is all before we even get to the defense.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. And look, the quarterback obviously gets number 1 rank. I think we saw that coming. Now they have coaching as the number 1 rank, which I'm not going to argue that either. We did our NFL coaches ranking list recently. We had Andy Reid number 1. I don't think it's really debatable at this point. But if you're projecting out, how many years does Andy Reid really have left here? I mean, he should be there in 3 years, but are we sure of that? I don't know. And to your point, Alex, some of their best players are aging here. Travis Kelce, their best offensive weapon outside of Patrick Mahomes. We know he's turning 35 this season. How much does he have left in the tank? Because we kind of saw him slowing down a little bit last year. He came back on in the playoffs and for the Super Bowl run. Now, part of that might have been some lingering injuries, but it's safe to say, I think Kelce's past his prime. Chris Jones, we know, is arguably the best interior defensive lineman in the game now that Aaron Donald has hung it up. But how much does he have left in the tank? And like you said, I don't love this wide receiver room. I'm not a fan of Marquise Brown. Neither one of us were really big fans of Xavier Worthy coming out of the draft. We thought he was overdrafted. I like Creed Humphrey. Like you mentioned, the offensive line has some nice pieces. Trey Smith, really good guard. I like Kingsley Sumoatia, the rookie out of BYU, but we haven't seen him play yet. Look, this team has a lot to be excited about. They're the champs for a reason, but future rankings, they might be a little high.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the defense. Their best defensive player, Chris Jones, a little bit long in the tooth. We know that he's on his last contract, at least last contract with them. Karlaftis, a young guy. The rest of that line, Nnamdi, Mike Dana, we don't know what those guys are. They're kind of more journeyman. Karlaftis looks like a guy that's going to be good. But the rest of those guys, I don't know anything about. Linebacking core, a bunch of guys that are journeymen. Nick Bolton seems like a player, but he's got to stay healthy. And then you get to Trent McDuffie. We know they had to lose the other DB. What's his name, Brad? We could just do this.
L'Jarius Sneed.
Thank you, Ladarius Sneed. Right, and we know they have Jalen Watson coming up behind him, and they have Brian Cook, and Justin Reed in the backfield. But that's not elite or anything. That's really, that outlook is kind of solid. I think this number one ranking is like a quarterback ranking. You're just there because you have Mahomes, and you're just banking a lot on Mahomes. And as we go through this list, I think that's what we continue to see.
Yeah, going down the list, number 2, Baltimore. I don't really have a whole lot of pushback on this one. They've got Lamar as the number 4 quarterback. They've got the overall roster at number 4, coaching at number 5. That sounds about right. I think we had Harbaugh right kind of in that range. Front office, number 3. No problem with that because this team drafts really well. They develop talent. They hit on draft picks, it seems like every single year. So they've always got good young players. They always do a really good job of keeping this team young and ready to go and moving on from guys at the right time. I thought they really hit on Zay Flowers last year, the guy that we loved. He ended up being a really good player. I like rookie Roger Rosengarten. I thought he had a first-round grade. They get him in the draft. Of course, typical Baltimore Ravens, always finding value in the draft. And Lamar, I think, still has some really good football ahead of him, of course. This franchise just really does a great job all the way around. I don't think there's much to push back on for Baltimore.
Yeah, there's nothing for me there. And even as you go through the next few, there's a lot there that we don't really too much have a problem, maybe a spot up or a spot down. I really think the issue that we have starts when we get to 9 and 10, with this emphasis on 10.
Yeah, so number 3, number 3, Buffalo Bills. They got younger on defense recently. There's still a lot of good young pieces for that team to build around. And, of course, Josh Allen is still a young quarterback. Detroit at number 4 is a team that I think maybe should be higher, even though they're at 4, because they're so young. They have so much young talent. But, yeah, when you scroll down the list, you said 8 and 9.
9 and 10.
Oh, 9 and 10. So number 9. Yeah, let's jump to number 9 here. Green Bay Packers at number 9. This team was the youngest team in the NFL to win a playoff game since the mid-1970s last season. So you want to talk about a young team full of guys who probably haven't even seen their best football yet. Jordan Love really took off last year. Looks like a young franchise quarterback to build around. Now they have him at number 9. Seems about right. Coaching at number 12, I think that's a little low. I think that's a little bit disrespectful to LaFleur. The front office at number 5. I mean, okay, that's fine. That's a really good front office. They're another team that does a really good job in the draft and a really good job bringing in the right free agents when they do go after guys. I have no idea why they're this low. I think this team should be in the top 5.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that at all. I mean, when you look at these receivers, and we know that Christian Watson is a good player, he just keeps getting hurt. So he's flashed, he hasn't popped, if that makes sense. This is a self-built team. Their running back room, they improved a lot. Even getting Josh Jacobs, they brought back AJ Dillon, but I think Marshawn Lloyd in the running back room is a lot stronger now as well. And then when you get to the defense, Kenny Clark is a little bit long in the tooth, but then you get Quay Walker. You have, my guy from last year that I think is a stud, Lucas Van Ness, who hasn't even been able to get on the field because everybody in front of him is so good. Drafting Adrian Cooper this year, Javon Bullard, Eric Stokes, this team, Jair Alexander's still there. Let's be clear, Jair Alexander's only 28 years old. So this is, like you said, this is a very young team. I think they should be a top 5, perhaps even pushing for a top 3 team based on the fact of the youth of every single key position on this team. They have a young guy that is growing and going to look like a stud or going to be a very solid contributor for this team.
All right, let's get to number 10, Alex, because...
Oh, God. Jesus. I'm sorry.
What in the world are the Miami Dolphins doing in the top 10? Is there something I missed here? Because they've got coaching at number 10. Okay, Mike McDaniel's been a very good young coach, a very good offensive mind. I'm okay with him being at 10. Front office at 14, that's kind of middle of the pack. Quarterback at 16, when he's healthy, I'm okay with that too. But they have the overall roster number 11, and like I said, it bumps their overall score to be number 10 on this list. Look, this defense is going to be terrible next year. Now, I like some of their players. They've got some individual talent. I like Javon Holland. He's a pretty good young safety. Jordan Poyer, they brought over, another good safety. They've got some guys, but outside of Tua and outside of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, what else do you really get excited about on this Miami team? I mean, really, what am I missing here?
So let's talk about a few players you named. Jordan Poyer, for instance. Jordan Poyer is 34 years old. He will not make it the 3 years that for the outlook that they're having here. So this is where I'm kind of confused on how they're gauging this out. You talked about Jalen Phillips. We think he's a stud on the rise. Bradley Chubb, still a young player. However, every single time, he's just been oft injured throughout his career, going all the way back to Denver. They lost their stud defensive tackle, Christian Wilkins, to the fact that they had to go get 41-year-old, I believe, Calais Campbell, to come play because they could not find anybody to fill the position. Jalen Ramsey, good player. I look forward to him switching over to safety in the next 3 years, where I think he could rejuvenate his career similar to Rod Woodson. But I don't think this, you said Holland as well, but this roster is not good. And that offensive line is not good at all. Teron Armstead is on the downswing, and everybody else is just what they are. They just exist in the moment. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, they are what they are, but you went and got Odell Beckham, so they're real slim at the wide receiver. There is no depth there. There is no veteran depth. There's no depth on this team at all for wide receiver. And, they went and got Jonnu Smith, a speed stretch tight end that kind of fits the system. But outside of Mike McDaniel, and, for what it's worth, we'll get into it later on, we have some very interesting thoughts on Tua and his future, not necessarily with the Dolphins, but his future in the league.
Now, look, this guy led the NFL in passing yards, and we know that he can play, and we know he fits in this offense. But the injuries are a serious concern. And if you tell me that Tua is out of the league in 3 years, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at all. Now, I'm not rooting for that, obviously. We want to see the guy healthy. We want to see him have a great career. But if history is any type of past indicator, I don't know if this guy is going to last in this league 3 years. And I think you mentioned, like I said, the defense was terrible. I'm not sure it's going to be any better this year. And the offense has playmakers, but also a lot of holes. This was the one team that I think stands out the most as being way, way overranked. Did you know that Pint Glass Football is more than just this podcast? We have an exclusive newsletter. Sign up for free at pintglassfootball.com to receive articles and insights delivered straight to your inbox. But wait, there's more. We're excited to announce our brand new YouTube channel. Not only can you listen to our podcast on YouTube, but you'll also find exclusive video content waiting for you. So hit the pause button right now and go subscribe to our newsletter, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to stay connected with the latest football news and our exclusive content. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. We personally love the pick'em game. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Download the Underdog Fantasy app and sign up today with promo code PGF. That's promo code PGF to claim your special pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount. Alex, where do you want to jump next here? A lot of interesting teams on this list.
Good old Dallas. I mean, hey, we're heading down the highway to you, Dallas. I can listen. One thing I can't wait for is I cannot wait till we get to these division breakdowns because, boy, buckle your seatbelt and tidy up your spurs because I got some things to say about the Cowboys. However, for this moment in this episode, I'm not going to make you guys too mad yet. Wink, wink. The Cowboys, I have them actually trending down, and I don't think Cowboy fans can really push back too much against that. And that's literally because in the next 3 years, next year, during the season, and definitely at the end of the season into next offseason, you have to figure out what you're doing with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, which are the 3 key figures currently on your team on offense and defense, because you don't know which direction you want to go in with those 3 players. Now, there's been a lot of talk in spaces that myself and Brad has been in. And of course, there's been talk all around social media as well as the pundits in terms of what they should do. However, the Cowboys are very top heavy. Great players. I don't even want to say good because I think Dak has been great in the regular season. I think he's been a top 10 QB. CeeDee Lamb has been a top 3 wide receiver. And Micah Parsons has been a top 5, 3, whatever pass rusher, right? So those guys are all top 10 or top 5 at their position respectively. However, the rest of the roster kind of trends down a little bit. The number one thing that we've been hearing from Cowboy fans, they can't stop the run. They haven't been able to get the defensive tackle straight. They haven't been able to get the linebacking core straight, to the fact that they're using safeties as linebackers because they're either injured or they don't have them. Nobody's performing to the level. So I'm not sure if this roster is where people think it should be. CeeDee Lamb is a stud, but when you take a look at the rest of that wide receiver room, it's, they let Gallup go. Brian Cooks isn't the guy that we thought he was going to be when he got there, even though he's done that throughout his career. And I believe they drafted someone in the 5th round, if I'm not mistaken, that they're looking to perhaps step up. But I don't know what's in that wide receiver room besides CeeDee Lamb. I know but again, that goes to my point. They're top heavy. There's not the depth there for the entire roster for them, to be 14. So I actually think they should be lower than where they are.
Yeah, and I think the defense has serious question marks. Look, we'll put the Prescott and Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb thing on the side. You touched on that for sure, and I think that whole contract scenario with those 3 is going to be a mess, and this team is very top-heavy. How they sort that whole thing out is going to be fascinating. But when you look at the defense, this is the team that gives up a lot of big plays. They give up a lot of big plays in the passing game. Now, look, Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs, these are guys that take the ball away. They're good players, but the style of defense they're running, it's going to be interesting to see how it changes this year and how they decide to defend teams, because this team gave up a lot of big plays in the running game, a lot of big plays in the passing game. Sometimes they were a bit of a bend, don't break, and they were opportunistic. But this team, the last time we saw this team, I think Green Bay is still running for touchdowns right now as we speak because they couldn't stop anybody. I'm not sure they got any better this offseason. They've got Dallas at 14 on this list. So it's not like they have them in the top 10 or top 5. It's not the most egregious score having them there. But this team has some serious question marks going forward, and that's what this list is really all about. The next 3 years, coaching, they have ranked number 20th with Mike McCarthy. I think that's a little bit disrespectful. We talked about, I had Mike McCarthy in the top 10. I think he might be one of the most disrespected coaches in the NFL. To your point, they have Dak Prescott number 8 at quarterback. Now, in the regular season, sure. Now, in the playoffs, he's probably 32nd, but that's a different story. But yeah, this team has a lot of question marks going forward, and I think Dallas might be in for some hard truths after this season.
Let me ask you a quick question, Brad. With them ranking Dak at 8, and this is why I think when we were talking about this in pre-production, it was very confusing. Do you think they're ranking him 8th with an outlook of 3 years that they're saying that he will be there?
It's interesting. They don't really make that crystal clear in the article. I'm assuming it's more where he is now. Dak, you would think Dak certainly still has enough left in the tank where he could continue to be a top 8 quarterback. So maybe it's a little bit of both, I'm assuming, because it talks about, looking at the present but projecting out to the future. So it's kind of hard to say. I look, we've talked about Dak a bunch on here. He's a good player, and
Absolutely.
he's a guy that I think sometimes gets a lot of slander from the media and a lot of slander from fans. And look, I've bashed Dak Prescott on this podcast. I'm gonna point the finger at myself here too. But quite frankly, some of it's justified. The guy just shows up light in big spots. And until that changes, that narrative is just not going to change.
You know what, Brad? Let's take a step back because I did skip a team that I think we're actually very high on, and we think they should probably, more than likely, perhaps switch with the Dolphins at 10, and that's the Rams.
Coaching, they have number 3, Sean McVay. We had Sean McVay number 2, so that's fine. But we know he's one of the best young coaches in the league. And unlike Andy Reid, it's probably safe to say that Sean McVay's got a lot of coaching left considering his age. Now, they've got quarterback 22 in their NFL rank. Maybe this is part of the projection, thinking that Matthew Stafford is getting a little older. So maybe that is part of it, Alex. I don't know how you rank Matthew Stafford as the 22nd best quarterback in the league right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they did that either, especially what he did last year. As the team got better, he was able to get better. Obviously, Cooper Kupp, Kyle Williams, popping out and showing up. Same thing with Puka Nacua. And then Cooper Kupp coming back off an injury as they surge towards the playoff run they had towards the end of the season. But you talk about the retirement of Aaron Donald, and you see what they are now, going out and getting a Brian Fisk, going out and then getting his teammate as well in Jared Verse, one of the top pass rushers considered in the draft. Last year, getting Kobe Turner, as well as getting Byron Young and those guys popping. Now, there could obviously, when you're standing next to Aaron Donald, or rather your hand is in the dirt next to Aaron Donald, or when you're coming off the edge and Aaron Donald is swallowing up blockers or getting all of the attention, there's a lot more freedom for you to do a lot of different things. However, they did it, so we have to respect it. And the one thing we do have to respect, and I don't know where their front office is ranked, they did a lot of what we're talking about with very limited draft capital. Because remember, they gave up a lot of draft picks to get Matthew Stafford. They gave up a lot of draft capital to then trade for Von Miller. They did a lot of different things to get guys in the door just for that one Super Bowl run. So they were dealing with a lot of draft picks that were third round on back, and they hit a lot. And I think Les Snead deserves a lot of credit. So I'm hoping that their front office should be ranked a top 10 front office, but I'm pretty sure it's not. But what they've done with this team and what they've done in the 5th round, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds, getting what they needed in order to get this team up to par to be able to still compete after what they did with the Super Bowl and now with Aaron Donald retiring, he deserves a lot of credit, as well as Sean McVay, in terms of the front office and what they've done with this roster, which is young and surging now.
Yeah, I agree completely with everything you said there. And look, Matthew Stafford is really the only older key player for this team. But look, I think he could play at a high level for a couple more years. I don't think that's past the realm of possibility here. When he's been healthy, he still is looking like an elite quarterback in this league. To your point, Alex, they have the front office ranked number 8. So they did give them the respect they deserve in the front office. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point also, you mentioned all the young players they've hit on. I think a ton of credit does need to go to that front office because they pushed all their chips into the middle of the table to get that Super Bowl trophy. Like you mentioned, they mortgaged their future for that ring. And look, it paid off. They got the ring. A lot of teams do that and come up short. But the turnaround and the rebuild has been much quicker than most people, myself included, much quicker than we anticipated. So I have to give them a ton of credit. Sean McVay, a ton of credit. This coaching staff, this roster, they've done a great job of making the Rams relevant again and making them actually, and once again, we're going to get into our division predictions, team predictions here, starting in August, guys. But I think the Rams are a team to circle. I think they're a sneaky dark horse team in the NFC.
Brad, I think we're going to perhaps surprise some people with this one. The Chicago Bears, they're right now at number 20. And remember, this is a 3-year outlook. When you take a look at the Chicago Bears across the board, they just, from what we can see on paper, they finally got a quarterback. They went and got a top tier wide receiver in Rome Odunze. They already have a top tier or top 10, 12 wide receiver in DJ Moore. I know people are looking at DJ Moore. They don't know what he is really. And then you look at the offensive line and what they did. Braxton Jones 2 years ago. Then they drafted Darnell Wright last year. And then they had drafted Tevin Jenkins 3 years ago. That is a very young offense altogether. You even talk about Cole Kmet, who's another guy that's only 26, 27 years old. This is a very young offense across the board that's going to be able to grow together. And I'd be asking myself if I don't mention DeAndre Swift and Khalil Herbert as well. Two young players as well, all under 28. Keenan Allen, a little bit long in the tooth, but he's really just there for veteran leadership for the most part. But the gentlemen that I mentioned before with the offensive line as well as the weapons, they're all going to be able to grow together exponentially if Caleb Williams is who he says he is or who people believe that he will be for the next 3 years. This offense is everything is up for Chicago right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think 20 is a little low. Now, this team still has some holes, but there's a lot of good young talent. And I don't know if you mentioned or not, but cornerback Jalen Johnson, what a player this guy is. He was second team All-Pro last year. I don't even think we've seen his best football yet. They locked him up to a deal this offseason, and rightfully so, because we know corner is a premier position, and he is one of the best young players at that position in the league. This defense really started playing pretty good the second half of the year last year. This team finished strong at the end of the year after they got Montez Sweat, because they really didn't have much of a pass rush. He came over and instantly upgraded them on as far as getting after the quarterback, and the rest of the defense really started to come into place. I like this young secondary. I think there's a lot of good young players in that secondary. They're starting to develop. And really, I think the defense and the steps we saw from them is probably the only reason that Matt Eberflus is still coaching in Chicago. But yeah, what's not to like about all the young talent and the pieces they've brought in here? And of course, this draft that we absolutely loved, Caleb Williams. Look, you guys know how I feel about this guy. I think he has legit generational talent. Now, doesn't mean he'll live up to it, but he has that kind of talent. When you watch the tape, he's absolutely incredible. We loved Rome Odunze, like you mentioned. How about front office, Alex, being ranked 18th? I think that's a little disrespectful here to Ryan Poles and what he's done to improve this team.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of residue that's left over, either whether it be from the pundits, ESPN, or some fans saying that they did not do enough for Justin Fields. I mean, he came there and got DJ Moore. He went and tried to trade for Air Canada. It didn't work out, but he tried to surround him with as many weapons as he could, as well as trying to fix the offensive line, trading for Montez Sweat. He did what he could in a short amount of time, and unfortunately, Justin Fields could not turn it around.
Alex, before we get out of here, I think there's another team that we need to talk about.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to be upset or laugh, but ladies and gentlemen, the Jets have gotten it right over the past few years. If you want to talk about a team whose defense looks incredible and everybody has hit that they've drafted on defense, and when I say everybody they have hit on everybody. Quentin Williams hit, Jermaine Johnson hit, Sauce Gardner hit, DJ Reed hit, Michael Carter hit. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter that they're not high-end starters, but they're contributing on a level that makes that defense what it is. Will McDonald hit. I'm not sure what we're talking about and why they would be ranked 23, but they hit on Garrett Wilson. If you go back and I encourage everybody to go back and listen to our draft podcast, Malachi Corley is going to be a hit. Olu Fushanu hit. Joe Tippmann hit. Elijah Tucker, hit. Breece Hall hit. They have been hitting on offense, defense, at every single level, whether it be defensive line, linebacker, cornerback, defensive backfield, wide receiver, or running back. We can talk about the tight end a little bit later, but offensive line and running back, they've been hitting. This is the definition of a young, surging team. Yes, we know Aaron Rodgers, and a lot of this is weighted heavily on the quarterback position. He's going to get this year. He's probably going to come back one more year. But even getting Jordan Travis in the 5th round, if I'm not mistaken, a guy that probably would, Brad, you let me know, that probably would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick. I think actually a 3rd round pick had he not gotten hurt. And perhaps Florida State is in that national championship game, and we're having even a different conversation. Perhaps he's a 2nd round pick, given how he would have performed in those games during the playoffs.
This score is really shocking. New York Jets all the way down at 23 in the rankings for ESPN is shocking because you talked about it. They have hit so many draft picks out of the park in the last 3 years. This team is so young. They have so many good building block players. Sauce Gardner might be the best corner in the entire NFL. He's still young and ascending. Garrett Wilson, like you mentioned, really good young receiver. Breece Hall, really good young running back. They've hit on offensive linemen. They've hit on all kinds of defensive linemen, pass rushers. Outside of Zach Wilson, that's really the only glaring miss that they've had. Now, granted, it was a costly miss because when you take a quarterback number 2 overall and it doesn't work out, that hurts. But when you look at just all the picks that Joe Douglas has hit on, what in the world do they have them ranked, their front office ranked 25th? We just talked about Ryan Poles being disrespected. This is egregious that they'd have Joe Douglas in that front office at 25th in their rankings, considering how good of a job he's done to not only draft players, but build this team.
You know what, Brad? I think let this be a lesson when people start talking about front offices and who's good and who's bad, because this front office is truly only being judged on one position. Because if Zach Wilson is a top 15, or rather, a top 16 quarterback, or let's say 10 to 16 quarterback, they're ranked a lot higher. This is all, their front office is being judged solely on one position, granted, what most say the most important position, but disregarding the fact that you actually have to still build a team around that quarterback. But this ranking, as we know, is solely based on that QB position.
Yeah, because what's crazy is they have overall roster minus the QB 7th in their rankings. NFL ranks 7th. So clearly they're acknowledging this roster is loaded, and it's loaded with a lot of young players like we just talked about. Now they have quarterback 25. I'm assuming that has more to do with Aaron Rodgers' age than anything else, because projecting him out 3 years is kind of difficult to do when we really don't know if he'll even play 3 more years, and I get that. Coaching also brings down the grade, which I understand. They have coaching Robert Saleh at 31. I get it. Look, the guy has not won a whole lot of games. But when you look at the overall roster, and that's what we're really supposed to be looking at here, and the front office, which is being wildly disrespected here, I have no idea how the Jets are towards the bottom half here of NFL teams in this ranking. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. Once again, I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.
Zencastr is the ultimate web-based podcasting solution. It provides high-quality audio and video podcast production and hosting. With a full suite of professional tools, podcasters can seamlessly record, produce, and publish studio-quality content all from one dashboard. Zencastr's post-production process takes the headache out of audio production. Set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. Coordinating all your guests to record in person is painful and tedious. Easily invite up to 11 participants per recording with one click. Go to Zencastr.com/pricing and use my code PGFP and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.